So I guess what really made me want to talk to you about this was the idea that you could take, an SBOM and essentially come up with WAF policy. And I know it's not exactly SBOM that you start with. It's more of like a web app inventory. That's right, Daniel?
Yeah, that's right. So the ideal case is SBOM, but typically customers, they have at least a clue what kind of web applications they have, how many of them. And then from this inventory, in an ideal case, they already had a risk assessment. If not, we can help them to make a risk assessment, can give them some tools at the end to figure out how risky their apps are. Like my typical examples are, you have, for example, the menu of the cafeteria, totally not risky. Your company GitHub or some other thing, crown jewels. They are like with the highest risk. And then we try to figure out which app belongs into which category.
Now that's I'm curious because we've talked a little bit about on the podcast. We've talked a little bit about the OpenSSF and their initiatives on helping whoever out there get SBOMs together. Right? They're looking at helping the world craft an understanding of what software they have in their inventory. I'm curious, when you're out there in the world working with customers, do you find that people have SBOMs complete, or are they like in process still?
It really depends, on customer size, scale of the organization, maturity of the organization. There are some surprises, like small companies where you would not expect it, and also other surprises, big company where you would expect it, but then they don't, because it's just like the organization by itself is so big that the IT cannot keep track, and there's too much shadow IT going on. Yeah.
That's something funny. We just talked a little bit about shadow APIs last month on the podcast. That is something that we're finding is a huge threat in those, especially in those big organizations you talk about, right? I mean, you lose track. I've been in a big organization before, and we lost track really easily, as evidenced by one of the systems I worked on getting hacked when I was a very young administrator, right? We didn't know what version of PHP was on that box. Really had no concept, but the people that were poking around at our environment, they definitely knew what version of PHP was on that ticketing system and cracked us wide open.
They're really, now it's really easy to make a fingerprint of applications. There are many open source tools, like just start from OpenCRT to find out which certificates are issued. Then you go along, check, are these hosts in use? Are they protected by a WAF? Make a WAF fingerprinting, and then the attacker already has a pretty good clue without making a lot of noise that you would notice him. No? So it's very crucial to have insights in your applications. Also to have SBOM there. The other day I found an OWASP tool that will help you to make SBOM. Also very good.
Cyclone DX.
That was the name, right?
That was it. Okay. Yeah, that's an exciting new project. I guess I'm not sure if you knew, but I started working with OWASP on AI stuff mostly. But
I'm mostly also OWASP member, but just a paying member without any involvement.
Well, Cyclone DX is a great new project, from what I understand. I don't have the time to work on it, but of course, I urge everyone to check out projects if they can. So listeners, if you're out there, right, Cyclone DX is a really great OWASP project. If you don't want to go forth and purchase something to help you make your SBOM. So you have a method then by which you take an application, a web app inventory, and then kind of move into a WAP policy, or well, I shouldn't say a WAP policy, right?
Once we have the assessment or the list complete, then the next step would be like to move on to get a risk assessment done and so on.
Awesome. So, if you, I was really interested in kind of showing that. I know you have a couple of slides.
So practically we call it from web application inventory to successful web application security. So we figured out that customers have some typical challenges when they start with the Web Application Firewall and they want to go into production, into blocking mode. So they don't go for the low-hanging fruits. Very often they want to achieve like top-tier security on day one, and then they just take a too big bite. They get tired of false positives, and the policy never goes into blocking mode. Also, a WAF is a beast. We know that. You cannot just have one or two people that are kind of the network guys and at the same time they take care of the WAF. You need a team of experts, and it's difficult to find them. You need personnel, or you simplify to a level that it's maintainable with a smaller set of people. And then the third one is that often there's a difficulty in communication, NetOps, SecOps, development. Then also new methods like Agile, release cycles are shorter, and you just cannot keep track that your policy is always up to date. A new feature might come on a new URI set. You have to add this to the WAF policy. Another feature might retire. It's difficult, and you cannot do this for all the applications. So the approach that we take, and we try to categorize, like the customer needs to have an inventory of their web applications and APIs. And once they have that, they should conduct a risk assessment. Is this an application that is associated with a low risk, a medium risk, or a high risk? That's how we try to categorize applications in general. And from this, we go then and craft policies with them. We try to attach this level of protection or the level of criticality of the application with what kind of protection features we enable for this application. So on a WAF, you might have IP intelligence that will work on the lower layers, layer 3, layer 4. You will have methods for bot detection and bot mitigation. You will have layer 7 DDoS protection. On a particular WAF, you will have a product that is called threat campaigns. You will have attack signatures. And then you go like in the top tier, which has positive security and which requires a deep understanding of the application and of web applications in general. You have to understand what is the request, what is the response, is this a false positive, is it an attack, is it an attack in the context of the application. I've seen customers that they had an application that in a certain area, it was a CMS, you could post SQL code. So the WAF would naturally block SQL injection, but it was a CMS and you were supposed to post SQL code in this particular area. So this was an attack signature that for this particular URI subset must be disabled.
And also for those who aren't familiar with threat campaigns, it's a rather neat idea that will kind of protect you live from the big campaigns that are out there right now. So if we're aware of anything big that's happened in the world, we want to offer automatic protection to any other web properties that might be out there. So that is handy. Absolutely.
That's really a neat feature, like because it's so tailored to a particular attack, there's no false positive, and you can actually enable it and go to hang out with friends or to bed, whatever you are in mood to.
Yeah, well, as a person, I've administered a WAF before in very small scale, and I would have loved to have had some automated defenses from the big stuff that was out there, because I had to craft policy every day. I would look at what kind of hits I got, and okay, is that real? Is that not real? Okay, do I make new element of policy based on it or not? And it's so much easier to just have this concept of threat campaigns where, hey, if we know this thing's out there, we'll protect you from that automatically. Brilliant time saver.
Okay, and from this, like now we say we have categorized our web applications in level 1, level 2, and level 3, and then we attach these protection features to a policy. So the apps that don't need a lot of protection because maybe they are just a static website or they are there's no real threat attached to them. If they get attacked or if they go down, there's no information that can be lost. There we would typically recommend the customers to use bot defense, signature based only, so not JavaScript injection, just signature based bot defense, and layer 7 DDoS, behavioral analysis DOS. And then it's already a point for discussion. Do you want to use IP intelligence or not? Typically, I would not enable all the categories. I would just go for shunning and say I use it in conjunction with layer 7 DOS so that whatever IP address comes on the shunning list is blocked by IP intelligence. So with this configuration, you can pretty much use a generic bot defense profile that you can apply to every server. So you don't have to maintain it for each and every application in this tier or in this category. You can use a generic one. Layer 7 DOS is more specific to applications. It learns the typical behavioral analysis, and there you have to have one per application.
Now, this I really love this table. What it made me think about though when you first showed me this was one of my customers that was in U.S. financials. They had a similar kind of levels system that was worked out. And it turned out for them to be a tiering system. So they had I would consider this customer a mature WAP customer. They'd been doing it for quite some time by the time I got to talking to them. And what they would do is that what you have down here is level 1, they considered that their tier 1, and they kept that out of their data centers. They kept that all in the cloud, so that none of that, because that was the majority of the stuff that they were dealing with. A huge chunk of their attack traffic was taken care of by IP intelligence, bot defense, and layer 7 DOS. A generic layer 7 DOS policy, like you said. And they did, like I said, they did that out of the data center, so it conserved on how much traffic actually came to their edge firewalls. They did have a WAF set up in kind of an inspection zone between their firewalls. Their firewalls happened to be F5 AFM also, just because they used it for to create that inspection zone where they had they also had our AWAF in there, as well as some other things, Palo Alto security and FireEye and some other stuff. You see that.
If you are into products, you can build wonderful things with SSLO.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you can.
So that's where they kept. Yeah, then that's where they kept their layer 2 was at the edge, and what you had as level 3 here, they did a lot of that stuff. They had a RASP technology that they enjoyed, and so they kept that, right on the servers, which was a neat thing to do. We tried to replicate that with Nginx for a time as well.
Yeah,
but do you find that customers are doing that as well? Customers are breaking this up a little bit.
I recommend this if the customer has a certain size scale. It's not for a small customer, but if the customer is big enough, I totally agree that with distributed cloud, we can do many of the things that we see here at the front door.
Yep.
And then things that are, especially in containerized worlds, we can move this level 3 much, much closer to the application, maybe even with Nginx and App Protect. That totally makes sense that you split this policy in a front door and something that is closer to the application.
I was just talking with somebody about one of our Nginx engineers about how you would just about using a WAF signatures now in Nginx. That's sort of like a new feature and nice thing to be able to do. That was never in my bag of tricks when I was an engineer before coming over to DevCentral. But
yeah, and just the fact that now the policy can be a JSON file, you just keep it somewhere and it's movable between all those different products. With if there's not feature parity, it will just ignore this feature on Nginx and it will work. But the majority of the features that you need, they are there also in Nginx.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. So are you finding a blend of those technologies, like host-based as well as now, I guess, what do I want to say, like physical appliance-based and cloud, just working with all three?
Yeah, we see that. We recommend it, really depending on the maturity and on the scale of the customers. But if the customer has the resources, like manpower, and then it's a good way to go. Also, it gives like, if you decouple it, you can also give this to the DevOps people or to the developers and say, look, this is close to the application. This is your part of the policy. This part of the policy is approved by the CISO. This is our part of the policy.
That is a nicer option. I used to, I remember probably closer to 2010, like 2011, talking to a customer of mine about how to build WAF policy and incorporating the QA process incorporating WAF policy building into the QA process and having, the app developers be there for it. That was always a pain for them. It's much nicer if the app developers can handle their own JSON,
definitely.
Make their own updates in conjunction with the security team. That's brilliant. Brilliant. So before I close out of this view, also, anything else on this particular slide?
Maybe the last point here, where I say the level 3 requires automated testing. So there we also go in this area of the developers have to be involved. Like the right. Level 3 with positive security, we cannot build that without an app owner or without the developers. And also without staging the policy. Like you cannot apply this level of granularity in production and expect it to magically work with no false positives. The other thing, the level 2 is a bit of you can shift left, right with features on, features off. And level 3 is really, you take everything that you have, you switch it on, you tune it, but those are the top 5% of applications and you have to have the right people involved. Otherwise you might fail.
Yeah. So then I should ask this also for those people who are familiar with applying WAF policy to a virtual IP. That kind of thing is popular. It's something that has been done on appliances for decades. No matter who the manufacturer is, right? That's something that we've been doing with WAFs. With these different levels, are you finding that let's say your customer only has an appliance? Do you find that you're looking at a ton of different policies, or does this help customers maybe pare down how many policies they have?
With this particular way of doing things, last month, we moved a customer into production with, let's say, 10 apps in a month.
Okay.
Very generic policies, less policies. Within a month, they had approximately 10 apps in blocking.
Okay, that's good. Blocking in 1 month.
Yeah.
Yeah, usually, gosh, I can't tell you how many times I saw someone go into block, transparent mode. And 2 years later, well, we'll get there someday.
With level 1 and level 2, you can go into blocking really fast.
Yeah, I think so too. I've done, level 1, what you have listed here, I've done that on distributed cloud in 5 minutes. Check, done. Goodbye.
Exactly, and with automation, even in less. That's
Seconds.
the next.
It's great. I like having that sort of method, and the reason I wanted to have you on and talk about this, Daniel, is I don't think many people take the time to do that. I think most of the time what I see is people sit down and they just put a WAF up in front, and there was a time at F5 when we recommended that people just put it up transparent in learning mode, and that's all, and then you just kind of build policy from there. But I think with how many different attacks are out there today, that's a really, really hard way to start. I love the idea of the tiered system, kind of having different levels of threat that your customer can build policy to, rather than just blindly start, and you end up with sprawl that way. I think you end up with a ton of policies. You don't know what's in your policies anymore either. So
yeah, we started with this idea with the first customer, I think 3 years ago. We said, like, the customer said, we have 800 applications. What shall we do? And then we said, okay, now we take a step back and we analyze how we can get into production. We can move policies forward faster. And this is when we developed this idea. And since then, it's like our standard recommendation to new WAF WAF customers. Take a step back, look at what you have, make an inventory. This might take you a bit of time, but then we can move on faster.
I love it. Alrighty. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate talking to you. I guarantee this is going to be useful information for the community.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for allowing me to share our ideas.